This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All righty, there he is. Time to line it up, baby. Let's go. You got fantasy football questions. You got some lineup concerns, maybe some late minute trades, transactions you want to make. Send them in right now on the YouTube chat board while you're watching, or, of course, on our Welt and Rayom text line, 855-912-1056. That's 855-912-1056. You can also send them in on Twitter at Big O Show. Send them in right there. All right, Scott, what'd you think of last night on the fantasy end?
Yeah, I mean, classic Chargers game, right? They control it. They probably played better for the majority of the game, but they make a couple of plays, shoot themselves in the foot, don't get the victory. Disappointing to see Juju Smith-Schuster take a step back. Not many of the Chiefs I thought played particularly well on offense, but they still have the Reed and Mahomes DNA, and that's going to take them a long way. I also thought Palmer might have had a better game than he did for the Chargers. He had the late touchdown to bail out, but other than that, it was a very disappointing game for him. Austin Eckler off the mark pretty slowly through 2 weeks. Look, the AFC West is a division, it's the glamour division right now. Every team has a quarterback of note. A lot of interesting players were imported into that division, but there's going to be some speed bumps, right? I mean, Denver somehow found a way to lose to Seattle last week. The Chargers, found a way to blow the game last night. The Raiders did not look good in their opening week. With teams pulling back so much in the preseason, and some of these teams don't even run any reps at all, I think that's a mistake. I get you don't want to get anybody hurt in August, but there's something to be said for having your offensive line run some reps together. And you saw a lot of sloppy play in the first week of the season. And I think that could carry over maybe into second, third week of the season, where these players finally get these game reps and finally get maybe fine-tuned, where in the old days, preseason games, teams would play a starting team and a half. Now it's like they didn't want to get them on the field.
All right, Scott, the one thing that at least from what it seems, I know Mahomes is going to put up his points, but I don't, you talked about Schuster and all these guys. I'm not sure if there's going to be a receiver that is really going to be even worthy of even number 2 status in Kansas City. I almost feel like those guys are going to end up becoming flexes at best, because it feels like it's a Kelsey show, and then the ball is going to be spread out to everybody else, the receivers, the backs. I almost feel like we're going to have a New England rotation of backs like we've always had for many, many years. I almost feel like it's Kelsey, and then everybody else will rotate back there, after that. I don't know if you're really going to develop a 1 or a 2 in Kansas City this year. What do you think?
Perfectly reasonable concern. And, one of my strategies this year and for several years is I like to build a fantasy roster that has wide receivers who start themselves. I don't want to play the guessing game.
Right.
Is this an Allen Lazard week? Is this a Sky Moore week? Could I trust Palmer last night? Again, late touchdown, but he really didn't pay off for you. So that's why. And look, this didn't work out if you ended up with CeeDee Lamb, but if you drafted priority receivers in your draft, you're sitting on a Jefferson, you're sitting on a Kupp, you're sitting on a Diggs, you're sitting on a Devontae Adams, you're sitting on an AJ Brown.
Targets, baby.
That's where these teams' offenses are buttered. You look at all the receivers who got double-digit targets last week. It wasn't number 3 guys. It was all their alpha receivers. It was a really strong push-off. And it's 1 week. I get it. The NFL's a snow globe league. We could be saying different things in a week's time. But I think you need 2 or 3 receivers on your roster that start themselves, that you don't have any guesswork. You don't have any second guessing on Sunday. I want a handful of those guys on my roster.
Dude, it's just that none of those guys that you have there are considered number 1s. In fact, they're shady number 2s. Mm-hmm. And they might be number 2s only because they're next to like a studly number 1. Like I remember, years ago, Eric Moulds is kicking some ass, right? And then they draft this kid out of Tennessee named Peerless Price. And Peerless has these, season and a half. It was like a half a season. Then the second season, he had a monster, which was his last season there. he had a monster year. And so people thought that he was getting ready to elevate himself to become a 1 or a 2. So the Falcons give him the money. And he goes to the Falcons, and then you find out that he's really probably a 3 or 4. It was just that you were playing next to a monster named Eric Moulds, who was like a physical, athletic freak. And so defenses had to scheme for Eric Moulds. It's the guy you're talking about, right? That's the guy you're talking about that gets 10, 15 targets in a game because that's what he was going to get. And so, that's what I kind of see in Kansas City, that Juju Smith-Schuster looked good because he was with the Steelers and he was with other players that were better than him, that elevated his play overall. And that's my problem. When I look at those Kansas City receivers, I don't see a 1. And I can make an argument that I don't even know if any of those guys are legitimate 2s. You know what I'm saying?
Right. All valid points. And also, I think what you're going to have is the usage, the distribution of the ball in Kansas City is going to be spread out so much. And you're going to look at the end of the day, the box score. Guys are going to have 3 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets. You're not going to get those receivers with the 8, 9, 12 target games. We like teams where the ball is concentrated. Okay. You look at, I know Carolina didn't have a great game in week 1, but they look like they're going to throw the ball to 3 people: Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson. I like Robbie Anderson a lot more today than I did a week ago because Terrace Marshall didn't even draw a target. He was hardly on the field in that game. So you're looking at 3 guys who are going to see the ball. Look at the teams. One reason why I like Minnesota, I mean, look, Jefferson's great anyway. He'd be great no matter where he was. But that offense is so concentrated where it's Thielen, it's Jefferson, it's Dalvin Cook. They'll occasionally throw a ball to Osborne, their third receiver, or their tight end, who's trying to prove he can stay healthy. Which Irv Smith, Irv Smith Jr.'s father was an NFL player too. But when you hear that Minnesota scored a touchdown, you almost always know it's one of 3 guys. It's Cook, it's Thielen, it's Jefferson. We like teams like that. We want the concentrated usage, and that is a big part of fantasy. One reason why the Patriots, very ordinary receivers anyway, but they have like 4 of these guys. You never know. They're all going to get like these 5, 6 target games. There's no upside there.
Yeah.
In fact, the Patriots right now, granted, Ty Montgomery's out of the mix, so maybe the running back room gets a little bit more solidified. Maybe Stevenson can become something. Maybe Harris can become something. You could argue New England right now is the deadest fantasy team in the NFL. There's just nothing there.
Yeah, I'm with you. By the way, can you raise your mic a little bit? Just so, if you can, a little bit, so people, because I think it's coming in. I can hear it clearly, but it looks like for people across the internet, they might be hearing it a little low. All right, get your questions in, lineup questions, send them in right now. We're going to start asking him a whole bunch of these questions. All right, let me see. Where do I start here? Razzle Dazzle Crypto. Michael Thomas, Brandon Cooks, or St. Brown? Which one do you sit? Which one do you sit?
Wow. I guess I would sit Cooks just because he's playing with the lesser of the quarterbacks. I was actually really encouraged by that second half that Michael Thomas had, and all they do in Detroit is pepper St. Brown with targets off the bus. Another double-digit target game, another touchdown game, and a game with a very high total. I think Washington and Detroit will score points liberally. So I would really be fine to play any of those guys, but Cooks would be the one I would sit.
All right. G from Pennsylvania. Need 4 in a flex PPR. Jeff Wilson, Marquise Brown, Antonio Gibson, Matt Ryan, J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram, Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, Dobbins, we have to see a game from, and Mark Ingram is borderline rosterable right now. They added Murray. We know Kamara's going to have a role, although he didn't actually catch a lot of passes in that game. And I assume you have to play Ryan just because of the way fantasy is scored. Let's see a game from J.K. Dobbins before we view him proactively.
Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? Victor Hernandez, Brandon Cooks, Waddle, and Pittman. Any bad options here in a PPR?
Just make sure Pittman practices on Friday because he didn't practice on Thursday. But other than that, Pittman and Waddle look good to me. Waddle the long touchdown against New England, another team where the offense is concentrated. Looks like Mike Gesicki is just not a factor in this offense. It's going to be a lot of Tyreek Hill, going to be a lot of Jalen Waddle. I feel good about that. And Michael Pittman was a 3rd-round pick in a lot of leagues. I mean, he may be a top 15 pick next year in fantasy. He's going to the moon this year.
All right. Remember, you can send in your questions on Twitter at Big O Show. You can also send them in on the Welton Rayom text line at 855-912-1056. And right here on the YouTube chat board, you can send them in. Frankie Fresco says, Taysom Hill, can he be an option at tight end?
I think so. Now, look, 16 snaps last week. I get why that makes people nervous. But when Taysom Hill's on the field, he's usually touching the ball. He's going to have an extremely high participation rate, and he's probably their best goal line runner. And he's somebody who they'll use in a gadgety way. And keep in mind who we're comparing him to, right? Because we're not asking him to beat Kelsey or Mark Andrews or anything like that, or even like Dallas Goedert. We're asking him, is he better than Cole Kmet? Is he better than David Njoku, right? Is he better than Albert O? Which, and actually, if you went with Albert O, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But we're asking him to beat out the 3rd-tier tight ends. And I think that because they're going to use Hill in spots where he can score touchdowns and make explosive plays, I think he can do a lot with 16 snaps is low. I think that's going to go up a little bit, but he's going to be a part-time player. He's not going to be on the field every snap, and you have to be okay with that. But I think they're going to use him proactively in scoring position. I think he may end up the season with like 8 or 9 touchdowns.
Jim Ferguson wants to know Deontay Johnson or Rashad Bateman?
Man, it's just hard to trust this Pittsburgh offense. I know that Johnson will probably be the target hog there, but Bateman it's just less competition for the ball. Wasn't it interesting that Lamar Jackson didn't run that much in that Jets game? Now, granted, they didn't throw the ball that much either. The score was a little bit cosmetic. That game was kind of evenly played. I don't think the Jets are quite as bad as people think they are right now, but Bateman right now, it's less competition for the ball. If I told you there was a touchdown pass thrown by the Ravens, you would expect it to be to Andrews or Bateman. I know Duvernay had that 2-touchdown game. That's going to go down as one of the flukes of the season. File that right next to the O.J. Howard 2-touchdown game.
Right.
I still think it's a breakout season for Rashad Bateman. I'll play him proactively.
Pep0222 is saying, I need to choose 3 of 4 wideouts. Christian Kirk, Michael Thomas, Waddle, Sutton. Please help.
Man, first of all, you've drafted really well because I don't see any wrong answer there. I think I would sit Kirk only because of he's with Trevor Lawrence. Those other guys have better quarterbacks, I think. But really, I don't see a wrong answer there. I was really encouraged by what I saw from Thomas. Better days are ahead for Sutton. Sutton didn't even play well in his 71-yard game. He's such a dynamic player. That's the type of depth that you built, the type of team I want. I said the importance of having receivers that start themselves. Now, unfortunately, you have 4 of them that start themselves. You only have 3 spots, so maybe that will open you up to a trade. I would be fine to play any of them. Slight lean to benching Kirk, but it could really be any of those guys.
Frankie wants to know Landry or Patterson.
Because it's easier for Patterson to touch the ball. He was one of the more impressive players in week 1. Yeah, I wasn't sure what to do with Patterson after that breakout year out of nowhere, middle of his career, age 30. They used him in a traditional running back role. It did help that the Saints were in nickel most of that game, so power running was effective for the Falcons, but it's just easier for him to touch the ball. And Landry, we don't think of Landry generally as a downfield guy. I know he had the long catch that set up the game-winning field goal, but I'm glad you have Landry. Patterson's a running back. It's just so much easier for him to get his hands on the football.
Jason Myers wants to know Brady or Wentz this week.
Yeah, most weeks it's going to be Brady. You probably wouldn't even ask me, but Brady's kryptonite is the New Orleans Saints. The last time they played at Tampa Bay, 9-0 Saints. And I feel like if the Buccaneers ran offense for 7 hours that day, they wouldn't have scored. They did beat them that one time in the playoffs. It was kind of Breeze playing poorly, but the Saints defend Brady well. And look what they're drawing, right? Godwin's not going to play. Evans is dinged up. Julio's not 100%. This is a week to pull back from. I mean, you're going to have to play Leonard Fournette, and maybe you'll have to play Mike Evans. I get it, but I cannot play Brady proactively. And Carson Wentz has a lot of help. Curtis Samuel looked great last week. Jahan Dotson made a couple of plays. Antonio Gibson was effective. We know Terry McLaurin is a good football player. And the Lions could not offer any resistance last week against Philadelphia. I think that's a high-scoring game. It's maybe the only time I say this all season. I'm playing Wentz with Brady, and I'm doing it with a high level of confidence.
All right. Miguel is asking, I have both Hill and Waddle. Can they both make enough points to be in the starting lineup? That is so dangerous to make that move, as good as both are, but it's so dangerous. But
yeah, I would like to diversify that. I mean, don't be crazy about it. I mean, you don't trade Jalen Waddle for, Ramondre Stevenson or something like that, but I would like to have a more diversified look to that. I would just keep them together, and maybe wait another week where some injuries kick in. Nobody generally is desperate to make a fantasy trade after a week. Everybody still feels pretty good about their team. Injuries haven't gone haywire yet. But eventually, I would like to trade out of. I don't want to have two receivers on the same team. It just caps your upside.
I'm with you. Don't load up on V-Chain and V-Thor. Leave the V-Thor. Get Cardano. All right, here we go. Ayuk or Cooper?
Man, Jacoby Brissett looks so bad in that Cleveland game. It's amazing that they somehow beat Carolina. Averaged, I think, 4.1 yards per attempt. Cooper was open on a couple of plays. Now, granted, the Niners did not coat themselves in glory in Chicago, but it was a monsoon. There's an excuse in that game. They're heavy favorites in week 2. And Ayuk had better receiving stats than Deebo Samuel in the second half of the year. Now, granted, Deebo's an active runner, and be curious to see how much they continue to run him with Eli Mitchell out of the picture. I have to use Ayuk because I just don't want to go anywhere near that Cleveland passing game right now.
All right, quick answers on these last couple. Rain Man, Cooks or Curtis Samuel? PPR.
Curtis Samuel, easier to touch it.
All right, McFort the People, PPR, need one. AJ Dillon, Edmonds, Carter, or D. Henderson?
Cam Akers looked so bad last week. I think Henderson's got 18 to 20 touches in his pocket already.
All right, and Chad says flex spot, Edmonds, Judy, Devontae Smith, and Ayuk. Which one?
You know, Edmonds' usage was encouraging week 1. I know he didn't do a ton with it, but he's still going to get 15 to 18 touches. I feel pretty good about that.
Derek Carr, Kyler Murray.
I just don't want to go near Arizona right now. Give me the favored team. And look, the Carr-Adams connection was alive and well. 17 targets. They hooked up for a touchdown. Give me Derek Carr.
Claypool, Robbie Anderson.
It's going to be Robbie. I don't trust Mitch Trubisky. I know Baker played horrible for a half, but Robbie Anderson's got a higher floor for touches.
Burkhead or Stevenson, PPR?
Rex Burkhead, what are you doing, man? We want to see Dameon Pierce be a
1 week,
thing.
baby. 1 week makes him a star. Let's go.
He averaged less than 3 yards a carry, though. I'm going to give you a weak lean towards Stevenson because Ty Montgomery's out of the mix.
Follow him on Twitter at Scott_Pianowski. And on Sundays, he has presents for you children out there in the fantasy world. Tell him about it, Mr. Pianowski.
Yeah, part of the FF Live, Fantasy Football Live experience from 12 to 1 on the Yahoo Fantasy account. I'll be answering start-sit questions. I'll also be on the program talking about some of the stuff we talked about today. Is this the year of the receiver? And, we give out other stuff. We give out other presents. We make picks against the spread. We had the Chargers last night. We're 4-2 through 6 games. We talked last week about Miami beating New England, which, of course, they soundly did. We're all happy about that. So, whether you're making picks, you're playing DFS, you need seasonal advice, all that stuff, we're trying to help you every day over at Yahoo Sports.
There you go. And he does it all in a Santa suit, which is amazing. Follow him on Twitter at Scott_Pianowski. May the big wins be yours, sir. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the football. We'll catch up next week.
Great to talk to you, Big O. Be good.
Thank you, my friend. You're the best. There you go.
You've been listening.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.